Welcome to this online course content that supports preparing to take the Maryland Tree Expert exam. The supplemental presentation to the study guide is intended to aid those individuals who are preparing to take the Maryland Tree Expert exam as required by the Maryland Tree Expert licensing law. Anyone seeking to practice or advertise tree care services in the state of Maryland must obtain this license from the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. This presentation corresponds to the information in the online study guide. The text of the study guide, version 5.1, may be found at dnr.maryland.gov/forest. Click on the Urban and Community Forestry tab at the top of the page, and then Tree Expert Law in the menu on the left-hand side of the website. Maryland Tree Expert Exam, Study Guide version 5.1, Chapter 10, Tree Identification. Chapter 10 of the Maryland Tree Expert Exam Study Guide version 5.1 consists only of the following table of tree species. The tree identification portion of the test consists of the identification of 14 of these trees using photographs. All questions are multiple choice. The 14 trees will be drawn from the following list, so the remainder of this PowerPoint will go over tips and resources to use to learn tree identification. As with the other modules in the Tree Expert Exam Study Guide, version 5.1, it is important to first ask the question why before providing tree care. In this module, why do we need to accurately identify the plant species that will be involved in our tree care? Because knowing the exact tree species that we're dealing with can greatly influence the type and extent of tree care that we provide. When identifying tree species, it is important to understand the value of proper nomenclature, the scientific species name versus common names. Why is this important? As you can see from the photographs on this slide that are for Carpinus carolinea, this tree is also commonly known as American hornbeam, blue beech, musselwood, and ironwood. If we were to go to a nursery and ask for ironwood, we may not get this exact genus and species. When examining a tree for identification, it is important to use multiple characteristics to confirm our identification. These could include the range of the species, the overall shape of the tree, the bark may have a particular feature, the twig arrangement, the leaves may be very unique, the fruits, and the flowers. Let's look a little more closely at each of these characteristics. The natural range of a species is the area upon which it normally grows. Now, of course, we know that tree species have been planted outside of their range by humans, so this may or may not help you identify a particular tree species, especially in a garden situation or an urban setting. What is the overall tree shape? This tree is columnar in shape and is an eastern red cedar. This tree is considered to be vase-shaped and is an American elm. Bark may be another helpful feature to identify a tree. When evaluating the bark, look at such features as the color, fissures, furrows, and thickness. The tree in the photo is sycamore or Platanus occidentalis. The bark in this photograph belongs to river birch. It can be confused with black cherry, so again, it is important to use multiple features to confirm the identification of the tree species. Twig arrangement on the branch can be a very useful feature to at least narrow down the tree identification. In this case, the acronym MADCAP horse, standing for maple, ash, dogwood, caprifoliaceae, which are your honeysuckles and viburnums, and horse chestnuts all have opposite twig arrangement. What are other features of the twigs other than arrangement that we can use for tree identification? What is the color of the twig? Is there a scent? If you break it or cut it open, is there some particular scent? What are the bud scars? In this photograph, this is an ash twig, and the bud scars can certainly be indicative of what species of ash it is. What is the pith? If you cut a twig vertically, what does the pith look like? Size and width. Again, this is an ash twig. These are very stout-looking twigs. That's indicative of the species. And what are the bud arrangements? As we discussed previously, ash trees have opposite twig arrangement. They also have opposite bud arrangement. The buds on the twigs can be another feature that you can use to identify trees. Terminal buds are on the end of the twig, as we've learned in the biology module. The marks inside a leaf scar are called bundle scars. On this white ash, you can see the vascular bundles in the leaf scar. This particular formation for ash, some people remember as a happy smile. Here are examples of three very distinct end buds. The photograph on the left, American beech, has a very cigar-shaped end bud. The photograph in the middle is white oak. It has multiple end buds. And the photograph on the right is yellow poplar. Leaves are probably the most common feature of a tree used to identify the species. Of course, they are not always available, but most guides are based on leaf identification. When you use the leaves to identify a tree, you can look at these different features of the leaf: the arrangement on the stem, the size, the color, the scent. This photograph is a sassafras leaf, and when you crush it, it has a very distinct scent. Morphology or shape. Certainly the sassafras leaf, also known as the mitten tree, has very distinct leaf morphology. The density of the leaves. Imagine thinking of a Norway maple that has a very high density tree crown. Are the leaves simple or compound? And what is the veination or vein pattern in the leaf? Since leaves are commonly used to identify plants, let's go over some of the terminology used to describe the anatomy of a leaf. The entire leaf surface, the green part of the leaf, is called the blade. The leaf itself is the blade plus the petiole. Petiole is the stem that attaches the leaf blade to the twig. The midrib is the portion of the leaf that runs down the center of the leaf blade. The bud sits between the base of the petiole and the twig. If your leaf is a compound leaf, then there are a couple other terms to know. This entire surface is the leaf, from the base of the petiole to the tip of the last leaflet. This is a compound leaf. Leaf arrangement on the stem can either be alternate, opposite, or whorled. Here are two examples of a simple versus a compound leaf. The photograph on the left is an elm, while the photograph on the right is a black walnut. Leaves can come in a variety of shapes, including, as an example, triangular. This is a cottonwood. Oval for serviceberry. Elliptical for your elms. And this unique shape for the yellow poplar or tulip poplar, people think it looks like a tulip. Leaf margins can also be a helpful feature for identification. The margins are the edges, outside edges of the leaves, which have very different patterns. The photograph on the left is black cherry, which has a serrated edge. The photograph in the middle is white oak, which has a lobed edge. And the photograph in the right is dogwood, which has an entire edge or smooth edge. Although not always available to us to identify a tree species, fruits can be very helpful. They come in forms such as acorns, nuts, cones, samaras or wing seed, drupes, legumes, berries, and palms. Let's look at each of these in a little more detail. A drupe is a fruit that has a fleshy exterior with a large pit inside. You can think of your cherries, peaches, plums, and apricots. Acorns are a type of dry fruit composed of a nut with a cap of fused bracts. This, of course, you think of oaks. Samaras are a dry fruit composed of a seed with a papery wing that helps with seed distribution, such as your maples, your ash, and your elm. A palm is a multi-celled, multi-seeded fleshy fruit, like your pears and apples. A legume consists of a long pod containing large seeds lined up one by one. Most common species you may encounter are honey locust and black locust. A nut is a large, dry, one-seeded fruit with a thick, hard wall or husk. These are your hickories and walnuts. And your cones. These are seed-bearing structures of the conifer trees, consisting of a central stem, woody or fleshy scales, bracts, and seeds. These are your pine, spruce, fir, hemlock, and your junipers. Here's an example of two different fruits. The one on the left is a crabapple. The one on the right, a samara, is the wing seed of a sugar maple. Flowers are another feature we can use for tree identification. The different parts of the flower that we can use are the arrangement on the stem. In this photograph, the flowers are opposite. The size of the flower. Some can be quite large, others very almost inconspicuous. The color of the flower, again in this photograph, this has a slightly red hue to the flower. And the scent, sometimes that can be very distinct as well. The photograph is of the flowers of a red maple. There are certain species in Maryland to be aware of that are of concern because they are extremely invasive. These are Norway maple, Bradford pear, ailanthus or tree of heaven, white mulberry, paulownia, and common or glossy buckthorn. This is Ailanthus altissima. It is commonly seen in disturbed sites in our urban areas, perhaps in farm fields and along our highways. This, of course, is Bradford pear, another extremely invasive plant species in Maryland. There are certain tree identifications aids that might be helpful for you to obtain if you haven't already. Of course, there are a wide variety of books and field guides and a number of websites, including the Virginia Tech Dendrology site. There are a number of apps that you can download on your smartphone, and of course you can always go to nurseries and arboretums as a way to train your tree ID skills. Sometimes you can find local and online courses that can help you expand your tree identification skills, and sometimes the best way to go is to go with a field leader that is very skilled in tree identification. Here are some of the tree identification aids, the books that are commonly used. Of course, Peterson Guide, National Audubon, and Sibley are very common field guides that are used. Here's a number of websites that might be helpful to you. We already mentioned the Virginia Tech online website. Another one that has very useful information are arboretum sites such as the Morton Arboretum, and the National Arbor Day Foundation has their What Tree Is That online leaf key. Some really great apps are coming out that you can use for tree identification. Leaf Snap is very popular. A new one by iNaturalist called Seek. Uses your smartphone technology. You hold your camera phone up to the plant and it'll give you possible identification matches. And of course, Virginia Tech, we already mentioned their dendrology website, also has an app called vTree. When you identify trees, be sure to use all of your senses. Your sight, your smell, your taste, of course do that judiciously. Touch, also do this judiciously. Some plants have an irritant in them. Sound, certain trees do make certain specific sounds like quaking aspen and whispering sound of pine trees. And use your common sense. We hope you found this supplemental presentation to be helpful as you prepare for the Tree Expert exam. This concludes the final chapter of the Tree Expert Study Guide, Chapter 10, Tree Identification.